Welcome back. This is video number 3 of Life Relaunch Facilitator Training. Today we want to talk about something very complex, difficult to truly understand, but essential to the Life Relaunch ministry. Today I'm going to talk about the mystery of the human soul, the human spirit, and what the scripture refers to as the spiritual heart. To say that this is a mystery is an understatement. Nevertheless, we can understand this in part. Let's explore this together. The creation of man, both male and female, represents the pinnacle of God's work in forming the earth. Man is unique. He was made in the image of God. Scripture tells us that God formed the man from the ground, from the soil. Just picture God kneeling, forming the man, shaping him in exactly the perfect form to enable him to live in the world that God had created. Scripture also tells us that God breathed into the man. Picture him leaning down, lovingly touching his lips like a kiss. Man became a living soul. We often refer to the soul as the spirit and the essence of a person. The soul is that part of you that makes you who you are, and it will live on after death. The soul is that part of a person that's not physical. It is that part of us that is our personality, that makes us unique. We interact with our physical world through our physical bodies. We interact with our world in a non-physical way through our soul. When people connect deeply, that connection is made in their soul. Scripture tells us that David and Jonathan had a very close friendship. It says that Jonathan loved David as his own soul. A concept that has made its way into our culture is embodied in the term soulmate. When people find the person they believe they were destined to be with or connect on a very deep level, they use the term soulmate to describe that connection. Regardless of what we think of that term, it does recognize the fact that people do connect at the soul-to-soul level. It's how we were designed. It's how God made us. He breathed life into man. In fact, the Hebrew word for soul comes from the word breath. For years I have heard that our soul is comprised of our mind, our will, and our emotions. There seems to be consensus on that, and it makes sense. Man is also a spirit. The spirit is the place of communion and communication with God. Scripture tells us that the spirit knows, that the spirit understands, it perceives. It is life itself inside of us. You've probably heard it said that man is spirit, has a soul, and lives in a body. That's one way to describe us as human beings, but it's actually very simplistic. We're much more complicated than that. So what then is the spiritual heart? Scripture uses the term heart more than soul or spirit. The spiritual heart is the very center of our being. It is the eternal part of us. It may be the dwelling place of the human spirit, and it may be the place that the Spirit of God is to dwell in the heart of every believer. The heart is the deepest realm of the soul. It may be where our conscience resides and intuition is housed. The heart communicates to us more deeply than the logical workings of our mind. As I said earlier, this is very complex. In Life Relaunch, we use the terms heart and soul interchangeably. However, when we talk about a man having his heart restored, it's fair to say that God is working in the very deepest part of his soul. This then is the place of deep wounding. This is the place that the enemy wants to destroy. This is the place of injury that can affect our entire lives. So what's a soul injury? What is a heart wound? Let's take a run at this from several directions. One way to look at this is that a soul injury is an overlooked, unassessed wound that separates someone from their true self. This is a wound that causes a person to feel personally defective, inadequate, or unworthy. Another way to look at a soul injury is that it's unmourned loss and unforgiven guilt or shame that is often manifested as a sense of emptiness, loss of meaning, or a sense that a part of self is missing. A soul injury or a heart wound is a disruption of a person's fundamental identity in God, which shrinks our sense of inner goodness and beauty. This can fuel a haunting sense that we might be defective or tainted. We can feel like we're damaged goods. Finally, a soul injury or heart wound results in a lack of vitality, vague emptiness, profound aching, or a sense of meaninglessness caused by disconnection from the part of self that is actually carrying the emotional pain. So how do these injuries occur or the wounds occur? This diagram may help. In it, we've depicted man comprised of spirit, soul, and body. Again, we are much more complex than this, and the distinction between these components is not as definite as shown here. Our spiritual heart is the very core of our being. All the elements of the soul are connected with our spirit. The spiritual heart would be at the very center of this diagram with the deepest elements of our mind, our will, and emotions embedded in the spirit. We all know that life happens. Nearly every day we experience some minor trauma in our life. Generally, trauma events come through our senses. They come through our body. This might be something that we hear, something that we see, something that we touch or touches us that impacts us. Our initial response is typically in our emotions. We try to manage that trauma. We think about it. We try to make sense of it or try to interpret what has happened. A thought or a thought pattern may be established, and then our will gets involved. We make decisions. For example, an auto mechanic does a terrible job and overcharges you for the work. That is a minor traumatic event. You react emotionally, probably with anger. Your mind analyzes it and tells you that this is not a person of integrity. He is not a person you can trust. Then your will makes a decision. I'm going to find another mechanic. We deal with traumatic events like this all the time. Some are tougher than others, but generally we handle all these throughout our lives, and we keep going. There are times, however, when it is difficult to move on. Sometimes a traumatic event is so intense that it enters the deepest part of our emotions. The trauma goes right to our spiritual heart. Another possibility is that when the traumatic event occurs, we are simply too young to be able to deal with it. So again, the trauma touches our spiritual heart. These go deep. We still think about it, but in this case, the enemy, knowing we are wounded, often brings a lie, and that lie forms our belief about ourselves, God, or someone close to us. Our will gets involved. In the case of deep traumatic events, we may engage our will by making a vow. For example, a small boy is physically abused by a relative or a neighbor. It's a deeply traumatic experience. The enemy may try to plant a message, a lie in the boy's mind. That message may be one of fear or shame. He may then make a vow. I'm never going to trust again. This traumatic event with its deep emotional pain, along with the lie and the vow attached to it, can govern the boy's relationships with himself, with others, for the rest of his life. Sometimes the impact of the wound can work its way out and affect our body with a physical infirmity. Doctors periodically encounter people with medical problems that have their origins in their mind or their emotions. They are actually seeing the impact of a heart wound. As Life Relaunch facilitators, we get the privilege of working with Jesus as He restores men's hearts or souls that have been injured by traumatic events, or because of things they have done, or by things done to them by others. Jesus knows exactly and how each one of us has been wounded. He knows where the damage is. He knows where the memory is lodged. He knows the emotional pain. He knows the places that must be healed, and He has the power and authority to do it. He desires to set men free. He uses us, and He's going to use you. This is the essence of the Life Relaunch experience. To work as a Life Relaunch facilitator is a holy calling. The heart of man is a great mystery. The only one who can heal it, the only one who can fix it is the one who made it. I hope that this has been helpful. You will gain greater clarity in the months and years ahead. Pray for understanding. Pray that as you engaged as a facilitator, that Jesus will bring many men to freedom. We'll talk about the tools we use in the next video. Thank you.